And perhaps as long ago as 1200 BC, Zarathustra also said, I point out the way, it is the truth, it is for all living. Truth is a central tenet of the religion which holds that people must above all do good things, hear good things, and see good things. How was the religion so powerfully established in the influential civilizations of ancient Persia? How was it established there? What is its body of beliefs, and how have they been developed and disseminated? With me to discuss the history and philosophy of Zoroastrianism is Farrokh Vajifdar, Fellow of the Royal Asiatic Society and a lifelong student of Zoroastrianism, Alan Williams, Senior Lecturer in Comparative Religion at the University of Manchester, and Vesta Sarkos Curtis, Curator of Ancient Iranian Coins at the British Museum. Vesta Sarkos Curtis, how much do we know about Zarathustra himself?
We know that he lived probably around 1200 to 2000 BC, although not everybody agrees on this date. Certain people, certain scholars date him much later. But I think that he probably lived around 3000 years ago, and we know that he came from a priestly background. He lived probably somewhat...
Where have we heard that before? Somebody coming from a priestly background. All right, check this out.
In the north of Central Asia, sort of to the northeast of the Caspian Sea. His father's name was Purash, and his mother's name was Dugdo. We know that, for example, when he was conceived by his mother, there was enormous light shining around his mother.
Where are we seeing paintings of a woman, right, with enormous light shining about her, all right, having a son that was born of a, what do they say, a priestly background?
Sign of divine glory. And we know that when he was, for example, through later texts, when he was born, he arrived actually with a smile on his face, and he could also speak immediately as a newborn baby.
What's
child.
the proof for all this?
These are all much later texts.
Yeah.
But we know from his own words in the Gatha, in the most ancient, sort of one of the most ancient parts of the Avesta, the holy...
Hey, wait, isn't that what they always said about Jesus, though? Like, what, when they sing, no crying he would make? Think about that. If he's not crying, then what is he doing? Just looking at you with a blank look on his face? Interesting, isn't it?
Book of the Zoroastrians, that he was a priest. He was a high priest. And he had several revelations during his life. But his first revelation came to him at the age of about 30.
Hear that? She says about 30. When did Jesus start his ministry? What? At the age of 30? And then at 33, he's, murdered, right?
When he was taking part in a special ceremony, and these again are later descriptions. And he went down to the river to cleanse himself, and when he came back, he was carried by light.
Now, isn't that interesting? Because how many people want to argue about baptism, especially when they go back to the Old Testament, when they look at the king that was, he was sick with, and he went down to the river. When you read it in the King James, it says he washed himself. Others, claim that it meant that he was baptized, or that the prophet washed him, stuff like that. I think that's interesting when they're talking about with Owl of Mazda. His whole thing was he has to go down to a river and with water and clean himself. And we've all seen how, that they had the belief, when you look into the Jewish encyclopedia, that baptism comes from, the Babylonians, right? Where you went to the water, you dove in, you walked in. Once the water submerged you, you come back up and you're a god.
To a certain place, and this was when he saw Ahura Mazda, or the Wise Lord. And it was then that he decided to follow the path of righteousness and also teach the truth to people.
So the gods that if I can use the word gods, the deities that he'd been brought up with, there were many. They tend to be very muscly and victor-seeking. And he replaced them by this one god, Ahura Mazda, the wise master, the wise lord. What was was this a radical thing to do at the time?
It was very much so, and also it was a very dangerous thing to do because there was an awful lot of opposition to him. A lot of the priests, the Magi, were very much against his reforms, and he was not really, his ideas were not welcome. And also the other problem was that in his teachings he saw mankind and people as equals. I mean, he did not see for example, difference between rich people and poor people, and everybody on the last day of judgment came to salvation. So this was a very new idea.
So it's an ethical monotheistic deity that he reveals to him, Owl of Mazda.
Yes.
All this light and shining and smiling and stuff is later. And
this is
you're
all
shaking your head too.
mythology.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Never mind. This was revealed to him, and there was an opposition, obviously. How did he overcome the opposition? Because these people believed in their own.
And think about it. Didn't they talk about what Jesus had an opposition from his own people? And what does it say? He came unto his own received him not. So he went to the Gentiles.
Gods, and they had investments in the intellectual and spiritual sense in their own gods. Do we know anything about how he overcame it? How Zoroastrianism, the religion based on his revelation, how that beat, as it were, the others?
By sheer perseverance, and also at the end, he enjoyed the support of the. So legend says the king of the time, Vishtaspa, who then agreed to accept this religion, this good religion, and introduce it at his court.
Farrokh Bajispa, can you explain just the relationship of this new god, this Ahura Mazda, if indeed he was a new god, with first of all with the gods that he displaced or put down in the hierarchy, and then with his own system of hierarchy?
Well, the precedents for his religious or his spiritual teaching were already to hand in the Rig Veda, and many of the gods.
I think that's interesting because he's speaking about the Red Veda, right? And that has to do with India, right?
Which the Indians had elevated to the status of devas, the shining ones, were in fact reduced by Zarathustra to the rank of demons. So, whereas in India, in the old Indic texts, you have Deva as the shining ones, in the Iranian text we have Daiva correspondingly, but with exactly the opposite meaning in Zarathustra's mouth. He displaced all the old gods. He just generally put them under the category of Daivas, but he kept two at least behind. One was Mitra, and the other was Varuna. Now, I should say Mitra in the Old Indic. He took the best of their qualities. Varuna was the creator god, the king of the gods. Mitra had a twofold function. He was the enforcer of the solemnly given word, the contract. Also, the god, therefore, of friendship. Now, Zarathustra incorporated these functions into this new Ahura, the soul Ahura, called Mazda, which, as you quite rightly say, means wisdom. And that basically is the being, the essence of Mazda.
And this Mazda, this being, was all wise, all competent, all...
Well, I showed you the owls. When you think about, was it Moloch? You know, they call it the owl, right? And they says it's the wisest of all creatures. It hunts at night and all that stuff. And I came across that when I was learning about Mazda's logo for the car and how it's connected to the owl, and how here in America they connect it back to Moloch.
All responsible. We have that monotheistic ideal there then. Is this the first time this has taken this revelation, or around the first time? I don't want to be in competition with Judaism yet, but I mean, is it around the first time that this monotheism has revealed itself in such a complete way?
As I'm aware, yes. Very much so.
Can you tell us what relationship the spirit world then of Ahura Mazda has to the material world? We have a god, a spiritual god, presumably invisible, somewhere else, and yet he is to be revealed in the physical. So what is the relationship? How is this wise one revealed, wise master revealed?
Well, the definition itself, wisdom is everywhere. If only we could seek it, reach for it, and use it. I think he chose the name very carefully, very deliberately. He could have easily said all-powerful, all-seeing, which he was, in fact, or well, he made it out to be in his gut.
So they claim that this was the first God that ever claimed to be all powerful, all seeing, everywhere at all at one time. They claim that this is where the Jews picked this up when they were in captivity to the Medes and the Persians here. How before that, the Jews in the Old Testament, the Hebrew people, you always had to go to a certain site, go to certain places, temples, hillsides, mounds, whatever, to come in contact with the Holy One, right? And after they leave captivity here, they walk away with this idea that then God is omnipresent. He's everywhere at one time. He can see you. Those verses in the book of Daniel where he says, or Isaiah and others, where he says, I'll sit down on my throne and see what the end will be. Well, that no longer means he has to go to a certain place to be able to see the past, the present, the future. That's just meaning he's always sitting on a throne, and so they claim that this is where the Jews got it from. They didn't have these ideas or the ideologies until they were in captivity to them. But I'll play just a little bit more, and we'll go on to another one.
As far as the monotheistic
I must
aspect...
just tell us as the Gathas are the hymns,
Oh,
the
the Gathas
16 or
are-
17 hymns said to have been, well...
I beg your pardon, yes, the 16 or 17 hymns actually are his own compositions. We know this because he tells us this. He says, this is Zarathustra, and these are the revelations as I have received them from Mazda. And here we go.
But can you just explain how we see Mazda, how we, as it were, the people in the 12th century BC, were told that they could see the wise master? This is a radical idea. There's one invisible person, all competent, all benign, and his manifestation is on earth, because I think one of the things is as above, so below. So can you give us some examples of what's happening materially that tells us what's happening spiritually?
Well, there is no conflict between the material and the mental or the spiritual worlds. In fact, they have been described quite rightly, I think, as two opposite poles of a unitary whole. So man is in fact a product of the physical form and the spirit. They are combined within man.
Could I judge you, Alan Williams, what do you find